So, hello everyone. Welcome to our fourth meetup of 2021. My name is André Pinto, and I will be today's meetup host. I would like to thank you all for your participants today. For anyone who is not yet familiar with our community, Deep Learning Sessions Lisboa aims to bring together people who are interested or want to learn more about deep learning and machine learning. If you want to be notified about future events like other meetups or reading groups, please feel free to join us at our Meetup page, and you can also follow us at our social media, specifically Twitter and LinkedIn. The format of these sessions is typically an 1-hour talk by our guest speaker, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. So please feel free to leave any questions you may have during the presentation in the YouTube chat, and we will try to address them all at the end of our talk. Any quick questions can also be answered by our team during the presentation. Without further ado, I would like to present our speaker for today. Rodrigo Fonseca is graduated in law, has a master's degree in business administration and management, and is currently pursuing a PhD in political sciences with an emphasis in security and defense studies. He has been a senior executive in several tech companies, and most recently has taken the role of CEO at Futura, a law and tech consulting firm providing specialized risk management, cybersecurity, data protection, and digital transformation services. Furthermore, he has been a guest teacher at Nova, Porto Business School, and ICEA over the last couple of years, where he tries to raise awareness for data protection. Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for accepting our invite. You may now proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, André. Thank you to your amazing group for this initiative. I hope I can achieve the goals of this session. And today we have here a challenge. And the challenge is to discuss the legal concerns about research in machine learning. The idea today is to provide you a framework to balance your research in machine learning and in artificial intelligence with the requirements of the law, mainly the GDPR and other legislation that is arising in nowadays. So the first thing that we may have is that the world is changing with the digital revolution, and if from one hand this digital world gives us many amazing opportunities, especially in your area, at the same time we know that these new technologies they sponsor new risks, especially risks for fundamental rights. That's why the European Union and the Commission, they decide in the last years to reassess the legal framework that was issued in 1995, that due to the new technological challenges, this framework was considered outdated. We know that with cloud computing, with social networks, with artificial intelligence, with algorithms, with the capacity of data processing, the challenge that we had in the past, they were completely changed. That's why to guarantee that we can have digital single market and a digital agenda for Europe, we needed a new legal framework that could allow you to research in a way that you don't jeopardize fundamental rights. So the main idea is that we need to understand how we can research in the new environment with these new tools, with the new opportunities, but in a way that we don't do this to jeopardize fundamental rights. And we felt since this radical change that we saw in the last 20 years, that the control over personal data from data subjects was getting lower, that the level of security and data security was getting lower, and that one of the main problems was that people were not able to guarantee their rights, and that most of the rights that were in the law were outdated, and that we need a new catalog of data subject rights that would be more aligned with the actual needs to guarantee a new level of accountability. And the GDPR also wanted to address the same rules across member states in the EU, but also to export this concept to the global communities and to the global industries around the world. So the topic here is how we can achieve accountability. So how can we guarantee that research is respecting the requirements of the law? How can we guarantee that we are following the principles and obligations that the law is foreseeing in different aspects? And how can I exhibit this to those who may ask us for compliance and for accountability? And this challenge is not totally easy, and in the last years is creating some noise around investigation, research, and even to regular corporate activities. The main thing that we need to have is that we have three different levels here. The first one is the rights and freedoms of the data subjects. So we are focused on individuals and their rights. And we need to understand if our actions are potentially causing damage to these people. So our focus is, of course, risk and damage, but this risk and damage is focused on the data subject, individuals. The second is that we may take advantage of technical and organizational measures that may reduce this risk, this potential risk of damaging the rights of the data subject. And this balance is considered accountability. That is when we believe that we take some risk, of course, but this risk is considered acceptable in terms of the rights and freedoms of the data subject. So the first thing that I want you to be clear is that we are talking here is about balancing risks, balancing potential damage with measures, and is balancing this that we can achieve the proper accountability. So accountability is all about balancing risks and balancing measures to mitigate risks. Many people thought that the GDPR was a kind of bureaucratic approach that we could just release with some consents and with some signings and with some policies that we can disclose on websites. And this is a quite limited approach, and the bureaucratic approach is the wrong one. So those who think that you can just solve this with some signatures, consents, and words and phrases, as I heard sometimes, is getting the wrong approach. The proper approach is the balance, the one that may take the different aspects of the law and yet balance with the different requirements and with the different risks. Of course, that getting balance, as we can see in this picture, sometimes is not easy, and sometimes we can break some plates, but this is the risk of being alive. So by the end, sometimes we think we are balancing and we are not. Sometimes we think that we are measuring the risk properly and we are not. But by the end, as I told you in the beginning, it's not possible to guarantee that we can reduce risk to zero. So the proper balance will, of course, be always between some risk and with the proper coverage of these different requirements that I will explain you then. For you, and you need a clear framework because this is not easy to work without a strategy. So what I want you to pass today is a strategy. Is how can we comply and during, before, during, and at the end of your project. So I will give you some advice here. Of course, this is not something that we can close today, but at least I want you to have the visibility of your needs in the beginning, during, and at the end of a project in the different aspects of this balance. So the first thing is that you should really take care of the impacts of your research in the beginning. This is what we talk about, data protection by design, privacy by design. This is Article 25 of the GDPR, and basically this is guaranteeing that you anticipate all the events that may affect privacy before they take place, before you take decisions. So you should always assess potential risks for data subjects in the beginning. How? By using a tool, a technical tool, that is the data protection impact assessment. So you should document your research and you should respond to a set of questions that will allow you to assess the risk in the beginning and to understand what type of measures you will need to take to guarantee that you can mitigate the risks properly. And how? What is measuring the risk? What is assessing the risk and the project? First, you should identify all personal data, and in particular, the sensitive ones, the special categories of data, like health data and sexual preferences, political preferences, religious preferences, all these type of data that the law considers that is special, that are sensitive, and try to assess what will be the data and the personal data that you will be processing during your project. The second level is that, am I using new technologies? Probably you will be using new technologies. And if you are taking advantage of new technologies, consider to perform a specific assessment to these tools. Okay, try to understand properly what type of tools you're using and be aware of the potential damage that the tools that you're using can cause to data subjects. So if necessary, don't forget to look properly to the type of technologies that you're taking advantage of in your research. And by that, how are these tools invasive for data subjects? What will be the impact of the project for data subjects? For example, am I researching in the type of data that may cause any type of discrimination if I have data breach, for example? Okay. Imagine that you're researching in infectious diseases that may point out for sexual behavior or misbehavior, for example. Of course, it's important to research on that data, but you should be careful to guarantee that nobody that is not in the project may have access to this data, because you need to protect the privacy of these persons, okay? And the wrong disclosure of this data may cause several damage for the data subject. Can, for one reason, this data lead to identity theft? Okay. What is identity theft? Is when someone on internet may use my identity to other purposes. For example, by taking advantage of my email address, or by taking my picture or my voice to sublimate in other people's voice, or even to use this on biometric research, for example, and by taking advantage of this identity theft to open my door, to open my bank account, or others. Right? May this cause financial loss, damage of my reputation, loss of confidentiality, professional secrecy, reversal of pseudonymization, that is something that people don't care so much, okay? Or other type of damage. Okay? I know that it's quite difficult to anticipate all the impacts. Okay? So we are always trying to understand what is the potential damage that we can cause with a set of data. It's not easy to make this prospective vision of the damage, but still, it's important always to make this measure and to understand the potential damage that we may cause, to balance this properly then with the mitigation measures. Can data subjects be deprived of their rights and freedoms? Okay? And this is sometimes difficult to forecast and foresee, but still we need to understand if the disclosure of the data may cause different problems to the rights and freedoms of the people. And sometimes we see this in different potential cases when we are researching, for example, in political preferences, when we are talking about researching on terrorism and other stuff, where we need to be very careful, for example, with refugees also, when we see some research in terms of data from refugees that may be quite important, but at the same time, they may have cause damage to the rights and freedoms of these people. So be careful also with this type of consequences that your research may cause to the data subject rights in terms of rights and freedoms. And are we involving vulnerable natural persons like elder people or children? Okay? When we are researching with children, and I'm involved in different projects where children are in the use cases. And when we have children, we need special care with that. Okay? And this project involves a large amount of personal data, may affect a large number of data subjects. The dimension is also important. Okay? Especially then, as you will see, to guarantee that we are not using more data that we need, and also to measure the impact of any type of data breach, because one thing is to have the disclosure of data of 1,000 people, another thing is to have the disclosure of data of 1 million people. Okay? It's not the same thing, so dimension is a topic here also. After that, we need to guarantee that we have a valid legal ground to process personal data. Am I doing this because I'm protected by law? Am I doing this because I have a public interest? Am I covered by consent, if necessary? Do I have the proper permission to process data when we need it? So we cannot forget that GDPR as a starting point is all about guarantee that we only process personal data when we have proper purpose and a legitimate purpose. So if I don't have a legitimate purpose, if I don't have a legal ground, a valid legal ground, then I cannot process data. I cannot take advantage, and I am always giving you this example. This is a sarcastic one, but at the same time, it's something that happened. If I'm in the hospital and I have access to the people that is dying, I cannot send this data to the funerary, that this funerary can take advantage to call people to offer services. This is not a valid legal ground to process data. And I may say this case, this is sarcastic, but this happens. Okay? So the fact that I have data, it doesn't mean that I can take advantage of this data. I can only do this if I have a valid legal ground. So balancing this is not always easy. And balancing this, especially in public interest or in consent, for example, is a huge challenge when we are discussing artificial intelligence and research. Okay. Then minimization. This is something that typically researchers from IE don't like. Why? Because you love to have high volumes of data to mix up. But the GDPR asks you to minimize. What this means? This means that you can only collect the data that you really need. Okay? So if you don't need the name of the person, you should not use the name of the person. If you can get your results with a set of 5,000, don't use 1 million. If you don't need the name of the father of the mother or the gender, for example, you should not use the gender, for example. So it's really important to anticipate what is the proper data that you need beforehand. Of course, this is not always easy because we know that at the beginning, sometimes we don't have clear visibility of the needs, especially the micro needs. We have only a broad idea of what we want. But still, we should always try to anticipate first, what data do I need and the dimension of the data sets. Of course, I can always correct this during the project, okay? But still we need to anticipate this on the beginning. You should select only relevant data subjects, relevant attributes, and you should exclude people or attributes in advance. Okay? Then purpose and storage limitation. Okay, so we should only collect the data necessary for the proposal of the project. So I really need to understand why do I need the personal data, and I have to be able to explain to data subjects why I'm collecting the data. More, I need to guarantee what is our rotation period. So I cannot keep this information forever. And of course, I need to anticipate, if possible, the period of time where I keep the data before I delete it. Okay? I should also identify the legal requirements apply for the retention, because different data may have different legal grounds and may be reused in different usabilities and purposes. Finally, and this is not less important, where I'm storing the data. Am I storing these on my own servers? I'm gonna take advantage of third-party servers. I'm using email accounts, desktops, my own device, paper. Okay, it's really important to understand what is the digital footprint of this data. Why? Because otherwise I cannot have command and control over the data. I cannot guarantee that there's no misuse of this, and I cannot guarantee by the end of the project that I can delete it. So if I'm not anticipating what I'm storing, then it's difficult to trace the data. And we need traceability always during the project. So before the project, it's really important to identify where should I keep the information in the project and who will be the ones that are able to keep it and where. Then transparency. It's not only about lawfulness and guaranteeing what the law foresees. It's also about good faith and transparency. So we should disclose to the people in a very clear way, in a very concise way, what is our research, for what we are taking advantage of the data, where should we keep it, when are we going to delete it, and be able also to be contacted, if necessary, to the data subject to exercise their rights. Okay, so privacy notice is something that you may have to disclose, explaining this. So it's not possible today to be a custodian of data, to process data, without fulfilling these transparency requirements. Okay, these are on the law. I'm not giving you too much detail on this, but it's really important for you to understand that in the beginning, after understanding what you're doing, you should prepare and be always ready to prepare this type of notice, and guaranteeing that you're totally transparent in the way that you do your research. Also, you may take advantage of third parties, providers, partners. Okay, so am I working alone or am I working with other people? Are these institutional partners? Are they partners in the responsible with me within the project, or are they just suppliers? Okay, and what type of suppliers we are discussing here? Are they reliable suppliers? Can they give me enough proper guarantees that they will comply with the law? Okay, so we may have to access the contracts with third parties, eventually also conclude new contracts, but by the end, don't forget, you may need to sign third-party contracts, and that you may have to provide due diligence to your provider, okay, and to your suppliers, and also to your partners, because you don't want to have your reputation lost and your responsibility and having responsibility due to a bad selection of a partner. Only work with reliable partners. And in my professional life, I'm always finding people that were be treated by their partners. Then, during the project, first, you should always try to keep update all the steps that we saw before. Okay, so having your privacy impact assessment always updated is important. But also, you may have to respond to data subject requests. They may have access to data. They may have the right to correct the data that is not correct. They may have rights to deletion. They may have the right to be forgotten. So you should be ready, and you should have a procedure to reply to data subject requests. Okay? And this is something that sometimes people forget. Also, during the project, you should have special care about security. Okay? Proper backups, restrict access to personal data. Okay, only people that should have access to data should have access to data. Okay? Guarantee that people use strong passwords, and especially multi-factor authentication. Okay, patch management, guarantee that everybody has the latest versions of softwares and other apps. Guarantee that you're only taking advantage of licensing software. Guaranteeing that you have the latest versions and you don't have legacy software. Okay, this is really important. Then also ensure that you have traceability on data, that you know where you have the data that you're responsible for. Also, anonymization or pseudonymization. This is something that probably you all know, but take advantage of this every time it's necessary. Okay? And also be ready for a data breach. Have a process to respond to an incident. Also, we cannot forget that the GDPR is always about having a proper level of compliance under the EU law. So you cannot go to third-party countries where the law is less demanding without having proper guarantees. And this is what we see when we discuss the transfer of personal data. Recently, we had this when about the census, where the Portuguese authority asked for INE to suspend the transfer of data to a US provider because our authority was not totally convinced about the level of security of these transfers. And this is substantive, but also procedural. What means? It means that we need to guarantee that our procedure is safe and that we have the proper guarantees for the third parties that are in third countries, that all the different legal requirements were fulfilled. Okay, I'm not going into detail on this because this is a topic for more than one session. But the idea that I want you to be ready to understand is that you cannot export data for a country that is not in the EU without having proper due diligence and proper guarantees. Okay? Otherwise, you may have a problem. And this means for partners, institutional partners, and also suppliers. Then, at the end of the project, and we are reaching the end, is that you should guarantee that you erase personal data that is no longer necessary, because maybe you may have to keep it, and that you document this, okay? That you have evidence that you delete it. It's not only about deletion, it's also about document it. Also, guaranteeing that you can document, because if someone asks you, you should provide this. Or you can also anonymize the data, okay, by erasing unique identifiers, erasing single pieces of identification, separating personal data from non-identifying information, by aggregation, or even by encrypting and then removing the encryption key. Okay. Finally, and to give room of space for the discussion, because we want especially to have a good discussion on this, we know that the GDPR caused some difficulties to researchers because the GDPR is a comprehensive law. So the Commission is working in the last 3 years in new guidelines to address the challenge associated with artificial intelligence. So what we think that is being done, and I think is being properly done, is to balance the opportunities offered, and we don't want to reduce the many opportunities offered by AI, with the potential risks that this type of tools and data may have for fundamental rights. So we need to properly balance both sides of the equation. So recently, in April, the Commission issued a proposal for a new regulation that will be the Artificial Intelligence Act. Okay, and the Artificial Intelligence Act will be complementing the GDPR, okay? And will be a new layer to address the problems arising by artificial intelligence. Okay? I will not go into this now because the diploma is still under discussion, and the diploma is also quite demanding on the concepts, but what I want you to know is that in the near future, you will have an additional piece of legislation to apply, complementing the GDPR and align, of course, with the GDPR, that will address better your type of challenges. Okay? And this is the type of documentation that you should study. And my final topic is this slide. The GDPR is all about managing risk. And you should first assess the risk, have a good visibility of the type of risk you're living, and then mitigate it. How? With technical and organizational measures. And by that, you will achieve the proper balance that the law requires. It's also all about documenting what you're doing. But the first step before documenting is to be on command and control on your risk. Have a clear visibility of the risk. And this is something that nobody can do it for you. People like me, we can be supportive, we can give you some advice, but this are the type of literacies that you need to control. There's a language, and this legal and technical language, you should properly have it in your daily basis. It's like having a driving license. Some people, they can have a driver, but most of the people cannot. So this is the type of thing that you should try to work, learn, and be able to use in your daily basis research. So I'm now open to comments and questions, and we have it a lot here, Andre.
Okay.
I try to skip this a lot to be able to have questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, Rodrigo. It was very insightful. I can see that we have some questions in our YouTube chat, so I'll just pick some questions and then we can answer. You can answer them, and we can discuss them. So let's start with this first question. Identifying all personal data is interesting, but how can we be sure that we are not forgetting specific people? Are there entities responsible for foreseeing and analyzing the impact?
No. The GDPR is all about responsibility. And those who want to process data, those who want to have the benefits of data, they are liable to do this properly. Of course, you may have someone with you supporting and help you. Okay, but by the end, these people will not be liable. Okay? So the law was designed in a way that those who want to process data and they want to have the advantage of data, as long as this is lawful, okay, then you will be responsible for the damage. So by the end, you may have someone and you may have entities supporting you for seeing and analyzing the impact. But you will not have anyone responsible for that. Okay, so when you say, are there entities responsible for foreseeing and analyzing the impact? The entities, yes, they are. The entities that take advantage, they will be responsible. You cannot do this in outsourcing. Okay, the responsibility will always remain on those who take advantage and they have the benefits. Okay, so this is a principle. It's clear, and the GDPR is addressing this responsibility always. Okay, so Pastel, I hope I was clear, but yes, you can get advice, but you should guarantee that you have enough capacity to do it, and at least to understand what others are doing, because you will be liable for that. You or your organization or those who are involved in the data processing. Okay.
Okay, so I'll just because we have a reply, I'll just show the quick reply. If there are no responsible entity, how can we be sure that companies are being compliant?
Yes, this is the main challenge of the GDPR. That is, maybe you think that you're doing the proper balance with the plates, but sometimes some plates, they get broke. Okay? I'm the DPO of a large restaurant company. And once when I was doing a training with them, someone told me, Rodrigo, there are no kitchens without knives. And this is a risk. Okay, so if you have a kitchen and a restaurant, you need knives. Knives are really dangerous, and you need people that can properly manage knives. But you know that sometimes people cut themselves, even in the best restaurants in the world. So you should be prepared in that cases when someone get cut to minimize the damage. But you cannot be always 100% sure that you're compliant. But what you need is proper people that can make a proper balance, but this proper balance will be always subjective. Then pray to the gods, if you believe it, or make figures, as we say in Portugal, if you don't believe it, that the authorities, if you have a problem, they have the same vision of compliance that you have. Because sometimes you have a vision, and the authorities, they have another vision. And sometimes you are in a good faith. And sometimes the authority is also in a good faith. But each one has a different vision. Okay? And then sometimes you have a discussion. Okay? So this is not, and it's difficult sometimes to discuss this with engineers because you like binary things. Okay? But the law is not always binary. Okay? So you cannot get totally sure about compliance, and you cannot be sure that something is not going to go wrong. Okay, so be prepared when something goes wrong, and be prepared to defend your position to the authorities, because this is the most important thing, is that if you have a discussion with an authority, it's really important that you are prepared for the discussion, because the probability of having a problem is lower if you're prepared. If you're not prepared, for example, you don't map properly the data that you're processing, it will be more difficult for you to defend your position. If you don't have visibility about where your data is stored, and I may anticipate this was the problem with INE, is that INE was not able to respond to the authorities in an easy way where the data was stored or is being stored. And you can imagine the role of the authority is these people are not ready to process data because they cannot address me the proper answers. Okay, so this is also important, is to have a good preparation. Okay, so if you're prepared to respond, if you have command and control, if you have your PIA, your data protection impact assessment properly done, if you have good contracts, if you understand your project, the probability of having a problem is lower. Even if you have some time of difference of approach with the authority, because the authorities are prepared to accept some difference of opinion. What they don't want today is to feel that you're taking advantage of data, but you're not looking to compliance and to the rules. So the most important thing today is try to do your best job. And if you do it, trust in what you have done. Okay, but no 100% full of proof guarantee. This doesn't exist.
Okay, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just a quick question related to this. When we have our data stored in personal disks, it's maybe easier to keep track of our data. But nowadays, with the rise of cloud services, how can we be sure that even though we have our data safe in our disks, our data cannot be accessed maybe by rogue systems or rogue companies and steal our data in cloud services?
When you approach to third parties, and we have an approach to risk when we manage our own risk, and the approach is different when we have third parties. Okay, so when I'm performing is more technical. So if I have my own data center, I will need to guarantee that my people, they do the patch management, that I have enough space, that I have proper encryption. So this is all about performing properly the technical requirements and the good practices. When I have a third party, it's all about due diligence. It's all about assessing what my third party is doing. So the approach is more about a questionnaire, is more about a contract, is more about SLA, service level agreements. Okay, so there's different when I'm doing myself or when I'm buying. That's why I separate here third parties. Okay, so when you have third parties, your due diligence is accessing what your provider is doing by making the proper questions. Okay? Then you have guidance. Okay? I'm not here giving you all the set of questions that you should ask for a third party, but the idea that I want you to have is that the approach is different. Okay? Because it's more technical when I'm doing myself. It's more about due diligence. It's also technical, but about due diligence and signing proper contracts and the proper SLAs and doing the proper due diligence, and sometimes even auditing, because you may have audit rights. Okay? So the law gives you audit rights, if necessary, to your provider and to your partners. That's why the GDPR is a lot about peer pressure, which is I'm guaranteeing compliance because I'm pressuring my partners and my peers. And I'm always, because nobody works alone. Sometimes we do some things internally, but we all buy. Okay, nobody do everything in-house. So we have all certain exposition to third parties. So people are pressuring others to guarantee compliance. Okay, and this is a different approach. One thing is on risk, other thing is third-party risk. Okay, and then you have also some good tools like bit-site ratings by SOX, by other tools that measure the risk of your providers. Okay, which is also interesting to understand what is your ecosystem and what is the level of security of your ecosystem. Okay, which is also something really interesting. That's why many companies today, they are moving from open clouds to private clouds, where you can control your providers. Okay, so you can guarantee a hybrid data condominium, we may say like that. Okay, but the topic is about third-party due diligence, third-party risk, proper contracts, proper assessments, and sometimes audit rights.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it makes sense that we need to have mutual trust in order to try to make that protection more easy for everyone. So just
procedural trust. Okay, it's not just trusting God. Okay, like in the dollar, in the dollar notes.
Yes. So just to change a bit the topic, Inês asks here, if you foresee a new market for companies that provide data anonymization services, so the sensitive data can be masked and not shared internally.
Huge market. Okay, not only for data anonymization, but for those who may have clearing services, which means if you custody data for third parties. Okay, so you may have anonymization in context, that means that I'm only providing you the proper data and you just see what you need. I have part of this and you only see what you need. So data custodians and data clearance will be a huge service, and also those who may design proper filters also. But I also see a huge market for encryption. I also see a huge market for those who may have data traceability. I see a huge market for those who may have data classification also. So I also see a good market for those who may have e-discovery data, also in unstructured data. So I see a huge market in those who may take advantage of this new approach where we need a purpose and we need traceability instead of just having data because we can. Because before the GDPR, we all were educated in the idea that we may keep data just because we have space. Okay? And now someone is saying, forget it. Start to clean up this. And we are not prepared for this. Okay? This is the fundamental change, is that now I need to take all this data and I need to guarantee that the proper information that is sensitive, I have it in a safe locker, that I don't have things on my table, that I delete the data that I don't need, okay? That I know why do I have these papers and data. And all this fundamental change is putting everybody nervous, okay? And of course, by the end, the law has an aspiration, but the technology will solve the problem, okay? So in here, my answer is yes, there's a huge market for privacy. And we see this, for example, Apple in 2017, they decided that privacy will be a game changer for them. And today we see them positioning themselves as a provider where their phones are secure for privacy purposes. They create many difficulties for cybersecurity research because it's impossible almost to jailbreak an iPhone. Okay, and there are 2 or 3 software providers in the US and Israel. They say that for law enforcement they can do it, but still, if you're using an iPhone 12, I can guarantee you that it's really difficult to have access to that. But not only, we saw that they have now an iOS, a filter, that if you are not allowed to share information with Instagram, for example, they don't share it. And more features they will be released in the future. So privacy will be an advantage. People start looking at this as an advantage. So by the end, those who are not addressing privacy will be like in 20 years ago, those who were not addressing, they were addressing pollution. So if you don't take care of the environment, probably you are dead as a company. Okay, so in a few years, you will see that privacy should be embedded in your processes, otherwise you will be dead. So of course, there's a huge technical market for this. And one of my main goals is to guarantee that you people, technical people, understand this opportunity. Because without technology, there will be no compliance and no accountability. It will be only something that is written in the law. It will be an aspiration, but not a reality.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned Instagram, and that nowadays we sometimes have the possibility to choose to which apps we can send our data and maybe tick off the possibility of sharing with some. And related to that, Ivo asks, shouldn't privacy agreements of websites or apps be more specific in regard to the exact purposes of data collection? What is being done to protect end users in terms of regulating these contracts?
Quite interesting question. And I may say, yes, the law, Article 12 to 14, force you to be really specific. What is the problem? The main problem is that there's a huge difficulty to put everybody talking about this. Okay, so when I start doing this privacy notice and these agreements, it was really difficult to understand what was being done behind these technologies. And it's not easy to extract this information from the technical people. So sometimes people are trying to disclose and they don't know how to do it. we see this a lot with cookies. We see this a lot with scripts. We see this a lot with analytics and the purpose of analytics. It's not really transparent what we see. And I know that next year, this topic will be a hot topic. Why? Because we will have the release of the privacy directive that will address this specific topic, evil. And moreover, we know that the None of Your Business ONG that was founded by Mr. Schrems, that was the one that put all these the transfer for third countries, that they are launching a huge campaign to test this, okay? And they will disclose those who are not doing this properly. And I may also say that the different authorities, they will put this in the first layer of inspections for next years. So this will be a hot topic, and everybody should be really careful about transparency. Okay, so most of the privacy notices that I saw in the last years, they are not properly done. Okay? It's really difficult to do it. If you want to and see one that is really well done, you may see Custo Justo, because I was responsible for that, and you will see, Ivo, the type of detail that we put into that. But I know that this is not the trending topic for most of the people, and that we are not the pattern. Okay? So yes, we should do this. Yes, we should force them to be more transparent. Yes, you can protest, and you should protest if you are not comfortable, but you may also trust that authorities and legal makers, they have this on the first line of care. So in the next years, this must be solved, and we need more transparency. But of course, we cannot forget that putting legal people and technical people talking the same language is not sometimes easy. And I may say that even with good faith, doing this is not easy. And I'm doing this every day, and extracting the proper information from marketing people, for back office people, from IT, from developers, from even the tools, because sometimes you buy a tool and buy the result, but you don't know exactly what the provider is doing, so you don't have visibility. Okay, so it's really difficult to design all this. But even with that, we cannot forget we have to comply. So yes, Ivo, good question. Thank you for that. This will be also a really interesting topic to follow in the next 3 years.
Yeah, okay. So I think we cannot talk about the data protection without mentioning the event of Cambridge Analytica, right? And so that scandal actually, I think, created a lot of discussion in this area. And related to that, João asks if large companies sometimes have unwanted leaks, like Facebook recently, do you believe GDPR made a meaningful difference to make these companies more careful with data?
Yes, and I may say that I was not the most optimistic person. My background is mainly cybersecurity and forensics and audit. So I reached the GDPR because I was doing cyber, and I was graduating law, although I'm not a militant in law. It was something that I have done in the past, long time ago. But the fact that I was more or less in the law part of the force meant that by the end I was required to do this a lot. But when this started, I was not totally optimistic about the result. I thought this was like an aspirational from the EU, but something that, of course, it was not going to be in the agenda of the CEOs. But the fact is that I was totally wrong. Okay? And after 3 years, I may say that this law was really disruptive. Of course, you have those companies that are doing a lot. You have the companies that they are worried, they think they are doing a lot, but they are doing nothing special. And of course, you have those who are not doing nothing. But still, the trend is to change, and things are changing a lot. Okay? So today, we may say that there's a minimal difference between the world today and the world 5 years ago. And I'm seeing many companies that radically change their strategy. And when I'm saying strategy, even their operational strategy. The way they are designing applications and they are buying applications, the way they are doing business, the way they are storing data, the way they are minimizing data, all the effort that many companies are doing is really important. Then you see also software providers trying to align their tools to the GDPR. And these are the spreaders. Why? Because if you have Microsoft doing this seriously, the world's changed a lot. Because all Microsoft users, they will follow the path. And I may say that Microsoft is doing a really committed work to adapt. Okay, at 360 grades approach. Okay, so then some people like Microsoft, others don't like, and I'm not getting into the discussion. Okay, but the main software provider in the world is looking at this in a very serious with a very serious approach. So everybody that then take advantage of their tools, which are all of us, okay, then we will change the path, even without knowing that. So yes, João, we are in the right path. Are we near the future? No. We need decades to change the total to change this. Okay, that's why it's really interesting, because we have a long way to accountability to achieve, and some people say that the most interesting part is the way, is not the destination. So doing this way is the most interesting part. So the destination is just the ambition.
Okay, so I think I will select just 2 more questions, and then we can end the talk, because I think we have been through some questions already. First, what is your opinion in having different legislation in different countries? Do you think companies will comply, or is there a risk that they fly away the country to avoid these stricter regulations?
And this is an interesting topic, which is the GDPR born with a DNA of being global and being the global pattern. And you may have different legislations as long as you align the pattern. Okay, so that's why there's the so-called adequacy decisions. What are the adequacy decisions? The EU, where they analyze the legislation, for example, of Switzerland, Norway, Israel, Uruguay, and they consider that these countries have an adequate level and an approach that is similar to Europe. So they are compatible with our pattern. This is interesting. Why? Because we see that the world, and most of the world now, is moving in a way they are compatible with the European pattern. So by the end, and this for me is the most surprising achievement of the GDPR, is that we are not used to see Europe establishing patterns. Okay, and the GDPR and privacy, Europe is leading this. And then what we see is that most of the global companies, when they have to choose a pattern, they are choosing the European pattern. Why? Because it's the most demanding. Okay, so what people need to do is to understand that the European pattern today is winning the war. Okay, but is this the final moment? I don't know. Okay, is China and the US going to follow, and Russia following this? We will see. Okay, but by the end, it's really important, and in technology, it's really important to have a pattern. Of course, then we may have different legislations, but at least the approach should be compatible. Otherwise, this will be really difficult for certain technologies. But from what I'm seeing today is that most of the companies, they are trying to follow the GDPR pattern. And other laws, they are looking at the GDPR as a reference. For example, next week I will be involved in a training session with Brazil where they have a law, and they always compare their own law with the GDPR. So it's also almost impossible to have a discussion in Brazil today of their LPD without having the GDPR approach. Okay, and by the end, the GDPR is being the flag that is guiding all this. Let's see by the end if this pattern is able to be global. Okay, so it's still early to understand. And if we can go deeper on this pattern, because as someone asked, I think Ivo, we will have new layers of legislation in next years. The GDPR was just a starting point. And by the end, we will see if our pattern will be the winning pattern. But today, I'm more optimistic than I was 5 years ago when I started looking at the GDPR.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. So to wrap up, let's just address Inês' question. Designing a system that verifies if a company is following data privacy laws is difficult and time-consuming. Do you think that we'll need an AI system to check whether another AI system is compliant?
I think what we need first is to learn to do this manually. Okay, when we will be totally secure and confident about what we are doing, maybe we will be prepared to emulate this artificially. Okay, but trying to emulate something that today we don't control properly, I don't think that is a good strategy. Okay, so the first thing is that I believe that all of you will need to learn more about this and be able to do your own assessments. Okay, then maybe in the future, when we all as a community have the proper knowledge of what is this risk, because we are still trying to understand and learn about this risk, then maybe we can emulate it. And of course, in the future, it's like a doctor. We see many people saying that in the future, the prescriptions will be done by machines, but still we like to have a doctor, okay? And everything that is measuring risk, we can have advantage of tools, but we still like to have human touch. Okay? So the most important thing today, and this is the main challenge, and this is the challenge that I will leave here for the future, is that I'm involved in Nova University, as André pointed out in the beginning. I'm also involved with other academies in the north of Portugal and also in Aveiro. And I'm committed with the personal knowledge of this in the future, especially for researchers. Okay? I'm data protection officer of Nova University, and one of the things that I'm realizing is that we need to take care of people that is researching. Okay? We need to give you the tools. We need you to pass you the knowledge so you may be autonomous in your projects. So in the next years, try to be a good driver on this. Try to get your license, and we will provide certification in the near future for this. Try to be in touch of the trends on this, okay? And try to incorporate this on your projects, okay? And we'll be around to support you and to give you the proper advice and the proper knowledge in webinars, in courses, in new institutions that we will launch in the near future to put this in your agenda. Okay, so my presence here is part of my commitment to transferring this knowledge to you. Okay, and you will need to have you by yourselves. Okay, and I need also to be challenged by you. Okay, why? Because this is a two-way learning. Okay, and in order I may guarantee this happens, I need good questions for technicians. Okay? I'm learning a lot every day by working with people like you, okay, which think in different things, and you are near the problems. Okay, I may be the problem solver, but you should be the ones that see the problem and ask the questions. But if you don't have the proper tools, you will not see the problem. Okay, so in the near future, in years and all that, thank you for your interest. What we need to do is to guarantee that you may have the sensitivity to understand the problems and to see the problems, because you will be the eyes and the first layer, because you're the one that are creating the technology, that are taking advantage of data. And so you are the one that may see, okay, and may ask the proper questions. Otherwise, what I'm doing is just reading the law. Okay? And by reading the law, nobody learns anything. Okay? And because the law is already done. You don't learn anything with the law. You need to learn with reality. So please always contact me when you have a problem, when you have a doubt, when you have a challenge, when you have something disruptive in your mind, in order that we may do this way together.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rodrigo, once more for your talk, and thank you for raising awareness for this very important topic. I think we can all agree that is very important for us in our area to have also conscience about what we should do in order to protect the data from the users that we collect them, right? So thank you once more, and we hope that maybe next time we can also have more time for other questions. So
it's always the problem.
Yes,
we are open the Pandora box. It's impossible to close it.
Yeah. Just to wrap up our meetup, I would just like to inform that this talk will continue to be available on YouTube, and we will provide the slides in our GitHub page. We kindly ask you to fill the feedback forms, which can be found in the description of the video, so we can bring more and better content that appeals to our community. Also, if you would like to be a speaker at one of our sessions, there is also a form for that. And so thank you all for participating, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you all.